I'm responding to the video I made last year. This is not space competitiveness. In that video, I directly address that whom is known as Senator Theodore Cruz. I say his name formally because I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. I have some sort of soul karma with Ted Cruz that's more than just political machinations. But because he's never met with me in person, there's a lot that can't be worked out. So it wouldn't be appropriate right now for me to acknowledge that. The substance of the manners in which I addressed it as space competitiveness are actually a part of a formal report that I composed, and other aspects of what would have been a part of a report that could have been connected to what was congressionally mandated as part of a bill that was passed in 2017. But by virtue of the fact that nobody got back to me before the notebook that information was in was stolen, I was not able to actually participate in the formal reporting on what was congressionally required in association with the passage of that bill. Other parts of it have shown up in terms of my efforts to try to engage with matters related to space relations, including regarding technology, as well as the law and how that applies in space and in relationship to space-based technologies. But I'm not going to mention that right now. I'm going to mention something else. I'm going to mention what I understand is called intangible property, but it is also known as abstract labor, which also could potentially be connected to abstract capital, including abstract capital accumulation. At some point in time, I was reading through some of the early works, including aspects of the Grundrisse by Karl Marx. And one of the things that was discussed was something he called abstract labor. This was an understanding of what you do in your personal time, your time off the clock, so to speak. And not only your time off the clock, but I believe could also be connected to what you do while you're on the clock, including in some sort of manual labor job or something that is involved in an industrial production process, where you have to focus on a specific set of actions in order to accomplish your actual job. But once you learn the job and once you become accustomed to it, you might be thinking about other things while you're doing your work. As you're doing it, you may be visualizing, you may be going over a problem, or you might be trying to identify something that may not be literally connected to what you're doing. That's not only abstract labor, but I believe it's also abstract capital production. And that this is what Marx was getting at. It's not just what happens in your leisure time. One of the big situations connected to capitalism and the advent of capitalism is the understanding of the time value factor, this understanding of work for wages. That when you work, you make a wage, but you're also expected to do things outside of the workplace where you're not earning a wage that are contributing to your well being and your capacity to perform labor for which you do get a wage. And it is as if as it was identified at the time, the capitalist actually gets almost a double bonus. They get your labor and whatever the production is based upon your labor contributions, but they also get what you have to pay for with your wages as an investment in the upkeep of you as a worker is part of what on the job you can do. So when we talk about, for instance, matters related to health insurance, or if we talk about matters related to benefits associated with the employer versus what we might expect from the state or what we might try to invest in privately, these matters should be considered. And in the age we're in now, with this concept of the information economy and what it means that information can also be a form not only of labor, but also a currency, how we manage it and how we understand our relationship with it is very important. Now, I contend that what's been happening in the last several years is that this is well known on certain levels. But there has been an intentional effort to disengage from a kind of scientific rational process around understanding certain aspects of capital production, accumulation, and distribution in order to alienate us intentionally from our own intellectual capital production. And Things like the 2008 banking bailout, things like what we're going through now, other things from the past that have accumulated and have created a context, including through legislative changes and international relationship changes, have also contributed to this process of attempting to alienate us from our intellectual capital production. And the intercession of the mental health sector and the manner specifically in which so called mental illness and mental health treatment correlate with this alienation from our abstract capital production, I believe is one of the central issues of our time. It's one of the central issues of our time, and it has been for over the last 10 years. And so the reason that this is so important now is because it is through intellectual capital production and exposure, as well as circulation, that I believe at some point in the recent past, in the last few years, I came into contact with people, however briefly, that themselves had already accumulated and had created a form of intellectual capital that I was the beneficiary of. See, if you're connected to an automated process where you're running derivative work functions, and you are engaged in some sort of abstracted, rote work that somebody else is able to access for literal instantiation, that's not the same as in your leisure time or even connected to a manual labor job. Reviewing things you have some sort of familiarity with, or perhaps even expertise, running through scenarios, coming up with arguments, engaging on observations, even creating visualizations, lucid dreaming even, is, I believe, a form of not only abstract labor, but abstract capital. Capital, why? Because capital is about the profit. And when you take and you produce and you create something that needs to be able to be matched with something else, paired with something else, you produce something that has to be received by somebody and taken and invested so that it can flourish. And this is what I mean by abstract capital production, intellectual capital production. And so when you meet somebody, regardless of how you actually meet them, what the actual encounter is, there are all kinds of processes that we are coming into that are not supposed to be proprietary trade secret information of a corporate entity that is intersected with us biophysiologically, including through the illusion of healthcare, so that they could try to automate access to our intellectual capital production and claim it as their asset, right? And so I already know that a lot of what I've been able to accomplish in the last 5 years that may not correlate with things I had direct practical experience with in my life, literally, prior to the last 5 years, has to do with the fact that I actually met with people that had created in the course of their life and their experience their own form of intellectual and abstract capital that ended up becoming available. And by being able to meet with me and me meeting with them and me sharing with them what I had at the time and engaging with them and them engaging with me in what they had at the time, there was an exchange. And it was an incredibly valuable exchange. See, this is one of the reasons why this situation with COVID-19 is so important, but it's also one of the reasons why we need to move beyond COVID-19 and the catastrophization mentality that has been allowed to pervade our society instead of actually understanding where we are, making an appropriate assessment, and then applying it. Actually getting to meet with people, actually adjusting bioresonantly, actually attenuating in order to understand different transactional processes, including information transactional processes, being able to self-correct, and then being able to determine at what point we feel we are best suited and negotiate with other people who have their other possibilities for participation in various other points in whatever the manners of engagement are, is itself incredibly valuable. And this is not a value that is supposed to be stripped from us so that somebody else can redesignate it, including in manners that are mischaracterized, so that there is a completely inappropriate misrepresentation of value and debt. There are all kinds of other things besides value and debt. including intellectual and abstract capital production, and what hopefully is a form of abstract capital circulation in a context of democratization that comes with a refusal to permit for and accede to an effort to try to compel one to allow for alienation at the points that may be the priorities of certain individuals or entities that believe that they're supposed to have market preeminence. Right? Markets get created in all kinds of manners. Why should somebody say that they want to be able to take an asset that's not well suited for that market, intentionally manipulate it in order to try to divest other possibilities from the world besides just the specific singularity of one market based on manipulation of an asset that actually might be too costly to misengineer in a manner for which it's not well suited? And these are the sorts of things that I'm really hoping that at some point is acknowledged, right? And in the course of moving on, part of what can be done is a reconstitution of an understanding of what it means to have informed consent. And then based upon a basis of informed consent, we can actually engage with each other in a critical analysis that allows for us to self-fortify. Hopefully, there are others that understand that when we want to talk about well-being, this is a potential perspective upon which to develop and implement priorities. I want to acknowledge that I know, even though we did not speak the same language as fluently, I do believe you are exactly who you said you were. I believe you and your colleagues exactly were who they said they were. And I believe it was incredibly, incredibly valuable, and I am very, very grateful. And for many years, I didn't think about it. It didn't seem to have a meaning. I was doing things in the practical aspects of my life. But when I first started to try to do some sort of legal research and do the composition, something inspired me that had not inspired me in that way before, and I believe it came from you. I believe, at least in part, it is connected to you and your spirit and whatever it was that you communicated with me. And I am incredibly grateful. Even if I don't meet you again literally, even if I don't learn your language as well as I'm sure you would otherwise hope, I am incredibly grateful. Thank you so much.